Hello, Gamecock fans. I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. Welcome to Season 4 of Ball Don't Lie, SGTV's premier live sports show.
JP and I will be giving you our weekly insight every Sunday this season.
This week on the show, we're covering the start of professional and collegiate football seasons, as well as
an update on Gamecock athletics across the board.
Be sure to stick around for our first week of head-to-head football pick'ems.
And without further ado, welcome to Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome to the Kennedy Greenhouse Studio.
I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry.
This is the one where there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer.
I'm always the get-back game guy.
There's so many teams with so many good wins.
Because, they love seeing Clemson lose no matter what.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that love seeing Clemson lose.
Yeah,
Return of the King released 20 years ago today. There you go. And for that reason, give me the Noles.
I like being right more than I like being happy.
I think the committee made the right choice.
Florida State did not lose a football game. It's football. This is college football. How can you not be romantic about baseball? It's just such a tremendous sport.
It's time. Is it time?
I think it's time.
This is Ball Don't Lie.
And South Carolina football is off to a fantastic start with the Gamecocks toppling Kentucky 31-6 in Lexington to kick off SEC play. And JP, what a game it was, and I think a real statement win for this team.
Absolutely. As you can see, they're 31-6. It was South Carolina's biggest road victory in conference play since they defeated Vanderbilt 41-7 in the 2020 season. And really, the standout performers was the entire defense. Dylan Stewart, Kyle Kennard off the edge, and Nicky Manworry really made up for that kind of disastrous touchdown he allowed against Old Dominion by bouncing back to lead the team in tackles, as well as grabbing a pick six. That really kind of put Kentucky to the sword.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. And I mean, watching Brock Vandegrift try and play football against that front seven in the second, I mean, the whole defensive unit, it was a pain to the eyes. And every Gamecock fan has got to have a huge smile on their face. You struggle with Old Dominion at home. You go on the road into Kentucky, a team that had been pretty hyped up, I would say. There were some people having
five-star transfer.
They do, but people were having them as one of the top 5 teams in this conference. South Carolina just came in, kicked them in the teeth, and just stepped on them even more. I mean, they just completely bulldozed this Wildcats team. And
they did, they did some dances, wore some stupid sunglasses, of course, and so, hey, that rivalry between Mark Stoops and Shane Beamer.
It's one-sided, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it ain't much of a rivalry if the other team doesn't win. And Kentucky had a little bit of a run, and then I transferred into Carolina, and Carolina hasn't lost to Kentucky in anything since.
That we're studying that trend.
So we're looking
incredibly
into it.
Strong. He's going to have to go for his PhD if we're.
Yeah, but and the fact is that I wasn't really I wasn't surprised that they won. Kind of, they won it in the fashion that they did, but I thought they would win. I thought the Gamecocks had a great chance. The fact that they came away with the win against Old Dominion, I thought, hey, you won. That's what matters. You go through this week of practice. You go through this week of everything else. You come back refocused, refined, and ready to go, chomping at the bit to prove to everybody that game was a fluke. And they did it.
You get to learn all those lessons, and you still were able to win. That's, I think, a huge thing because – that Old Dominion game was really down to the last couple plays, and they were able to get a win. Something, just some numbers to talk about this defense. 10 sacks through 2 games, and one of those against I don't think Kentucky's offensive line is that bad. I think South Carolina's pass attack is just that good. Dylan Stewart looks like the best true freshman in the country. He's turning heads at an alarming rate, and he's special.
Absolutely. And, hey, the road doesn't get any easier for the Gamecocks this upcoming week. We return to Williams-Brice to take on the Louisiana State University Tigers. And, Spencer, there's a little bit extra added to this one as College Game Day has returned to Columbia for the first time since 2014. It's going to be the 10th time overall that South Carolina has appeared on Game Day. But 8th time they've hosted in Columbia. It's been at the fairgrounds. It's been at the Horseshoe. It's going to be at Gamecock Park on Saturday because of that noon kickoff. Taking on an LSU team that it's a program that South Carolina, despite being in the same conference for the last 30 years, they've only played this is the 4th meeting since 2010. So not a huge amount of history between these two.
Pretty one-sided in that history, I will say. The Tigers have definitely had South Carolina's number, but also I would say a much more historically successful program.
That's true.
So I wouldn't say any surprises there for any lifelong Gamecock fans. But I tell you what, LSU, came into the season high-ranked, fell to Southern Cal in a really close game. Came down to the wire. Miller Moss kind of showed what he was made of. But again, this is a very
outdueled Grant Nussmeier. I feel like the takeaway from that game was
Yeah.
both of these teams might not be great, but we like the quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, they were a lot of fun to watch. And Nussmeier, I think, definitely the guy you're circling is the key player for LSU. He's got 610 yards on the season, 8 touchdowns. But again, they struggled a little bit with Nicholls State yesterday.
They did. They could not get the ball going on the ground after the loss of John Emery Jr., who tore his ACL in practice. Prior to the Nicholls State game, they really struggled to run the ball. Of course, they were able to pass it. They pulled away to win 44-21. But, you cannot afford to be one-dimensional on offense in the SEC, especially going on the road. It's going to be Grant Nussmeier's first experience on the road, something like that, and it's going to be the crowd will be whipped into a frenzy, I think, with all the festivities of College game day and following the big win against Kentucky. But the Gamecocks have not defeated LSU since 1994, so history not exactly on South Carolina's side, but it should be a good one. Hey, Brian Kelly and company, they've been able at LSU to kind of take care of business in some of these games, but we'll see how they can respond. They lost another big contributor on the defensive line in that game against Nicholls State, so it might be a little bit of a banged-up LSU team.
And, I did add that in on the graphic. I think that the injuries will play a factor. South Carolina, for the most part, very healthy. Haven't really lost anyone. They're looking good. The passing offense was actually able to get off the ground a little bit against Kentucky, getting Sellers out of the pocket, but not on designed runs, more so in getting him rolled out, giving him some more space and time to get those throws. And the guy I thought was fantastic against Kentucky, Mazio Bennett Jr., the true freshman, came in, caught his first touchdown pass in the garnet and black. Looks really good, man. A nice slot receiver.
Yeah, they started working Raheem Sanders, the transfer running back from Arkansas, into the fold in the passing game as well. But this is the game where you're going to need the explosive plays through the air, especially, flipping the field, going from your own 30 to the opponent 45 or something like that. You're going to need some of those big-time plays, chunk yards through the air. We might be in for a little bit of a low-scoring matchup. I think both these defenses are much more sure things than the offenses, with quarterbacks still kind of growing in college football. But I think if you're going to take someone as the higher ceiling in terms of offense, I think it would be South Carolina's with the talent and the lack of injuries. But we'll make our picks on that game a little bit later.
Oh, we're certainly not done talking with it, but I think Beamer Ball, you're going to have a high forecast of maybe some trickery. Sold out crowd. I don't know that for sure, but I can only imagine
we can prognosticate.
It's going to be packed at Williams-Brice. It's going to be hot. It's going to be a South Carolina game. I mean, well, they're playing, but a true South Carolina football game. And, they're not the only team playing. They played last week, and we're going to go over the rest of the Week 2 results from around the country. And it was a really interesting and fun week of college football. And I tell you what, we could say that every single week, and that's the beauty of the sport.
I think that's true. And, as we kind of roll through these matchups that really stood out to us, of course, we had the big-time matchup between Texas and Michigan, where the Longhorns really just kind of jumped them, Spencer.
Our hatred of the team in maize and blue it stems back to season 3, I believe. But I tell you what, that one felt good.
Season 2, really?
I mean, yeah. I mean, just however far back you want to go. I've never been a fan, but I tell you what, it was good finally seeing Michigan lose. And you got to credit them. They hadn't lost in, 16 games or something like that?
Yeah, and it was 31-6. Texas kind of pulled off on the gas. It probably could have been a lot worse. And for Michigan, it was the problems you saw in Week 1 against Fresno State, but it was exemplified against a high-caliber opponent. Just could not move the ball, just could not get anything going through the air. And when they were one-dimensional like that, Donovan Edwards couldn't do anything. Quinn Ewers looked good. I thought Texas handled the road environment very well. And they'll move on to starting to get into SEC play a little bit. Now we'll go back to some of those games here as we go towards the other big-time ranked matchup of the weekend. Number 14 Tennessee taking on number 24 NC State.
Took on is an understatement.
That's
they
true.
Took care of NC State. Goodness.
Yeah. As they destroyed them 51-10. It was a brutal beatdown for the Wolfpack. to suffer there. They had the ball late, second half, down 10-3. They were driving, but threw a pick six. And
Grayson McCall was not good, and you got to credit the Tennessee front seven for just making his life a nightmare.
Oh, and nothing was good for NC State's offense. I mean, Jordan Waters had negative rushing yards. They just couldn't. I mean,
it's not good for a running back.
Tennessee looked very good. I mean, Nico Imaliva threw for 2 touchdowns. They ran for 250 yards. It's really just. I was shocked when I found that score when we got home from the soccer game last night. But
hey, we'll talk about that as well. But some more games. I mean, Oregon hasn't looked great the last couple weeks, but they were able to take care of Boise State. But how about Ashton Genty, man? He's getting his name right in that Heisman conversation.
No, and I think this says a lot more about Boise State maybe than it does Oregon. I think that the Broncos are a big contender for that Group of 5 playoff spot. Ashton Genty, like you said, one of the best tailbacks in the country, had 6 touchdowns in Week 1 against Georgia Southern, and they were able to escape on a last-second field goal there. Dylan Gabriel, we'll see if the yards can kind of come back more. Then we move on to the matchup between number 16 Oklahoma State and Arkansas. Arkansas had a big lead early. Oklahoma State came back, tied it. Both teams traded field goals on their final possessions.
Traded field goal misses, then in overtime won.
And then Oklahoma State scored a touchdown, got the 2, and Arkansas was unable to respond with a touchdown of their own. And the Cowboys really came in with the win. Taylor Green looked good. Arkansas maybe
it's a fun game.
I think they look a lot better as the year goes on. Tulane, Kansas State was just a bizarre football game.
It was. I think that's probably what you expected going into it. It'd be a weird one, high scoring. You got 61 total points there, and it was a fun game. But Kansas State, I mean,
the late scoop and score off that bizarre sack. And Kansas State has a big game coming up this weekend as well. Tulane had 2 separate double-digit leads in that game, so they're probably kicking themselves. And then finally, Nebraska-Colorado on your nightcap. Man,
yikes.
Nebraska had 5 sacks, 6 sacks.
5 at halftime,
5
6
at half,
in the game.
And then another in the second half. Shadur Sanders abandoned his team, left the game early, then blamed the offensive line in the post-game press conference. The black shirt defense, 10 tackles for loss, and they forced 2 fumbles and a pick 6. It was all Cornhuskers in a 28-10 victory where Dylan Raiola didn't have to do a lot, but the true freshman quarterback is looking pretty good.
He has been looking good, and again, we'll go back to abandoning your team a little bit. I think it's definitely okay to identify some problems in your own team. Like last year, if you watch South Carolina play, you watch them play Week 1, I think Spencer Rattler got sacked 9 times. I think that's pretty evident that there might be an offensive line issue, but you stick with your guys. You know, you're a real team, and really Colorado didn't embody that, and I think it's going to be interesting to watch what happens with them as the season progresses. Are they going to band together and bounce back, or are they going to fall apart at the seams? Because it's hard when your captain quarterback or your dog, you know, they do dogs and leaders instead of captains. So if he's, you know, calling out his own offensive line and Dion in the postgame, it's either going to motivate you or those guys are going to turn their back on you. And it's going to be tough to see.
The Big 12 isn't the Pac-12, and I mean that in a bad way. I mean that in Colorado can probably get some wins where they couldn't last year, so we'll see how they develop. Interesting to see how Nebraska handles the next part of their schedule, as I think they go to L.A. to take on Southern Cal here soon. So Dylan Raiola versus Miller Moss could be fun. But, you know, as we exit Week 2, we can expect even more upsets and stellar performances this coming weekend, as we have a pretty electric Week 3 slate combining some big-time non-conference matchups with some old rivalries as we'll kind of roll through these. Starting off on a Friday night, this is 2 teams from the same conference, but it's a non-conference game because it was scheduled before Arizona joined the Big 12, as Avery Johnson and Kansas State will take on Noah Fafita in Arizona on Friday night. Spencer.
And Big T-Mac. I mean,
yeah, 2 high-powered offenses.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Both of these quarterbacks, I think, are 2 of the most fun in the country to watch. And, I mean, this one is shaping up to be all offense, and can't complain about that one.
Absolutely. And then we move on to the big noon kickoff on Saturday, as Wisconsin's going to take on number 4 Alabama. Alabama's first trip north of the Mason-Dixon for a non-conference game since they took on a sanctioned Penn State program back
That's a crazy fact. That's a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while, back in 2011. But, hey, Wisconsin, it's not the Wisconsin of yesteryear. I mean, the running backs are good, but Tyler Van Dyke, the transfer quarterback from Miami, has struggled so far through a couple games. They just haven't really blown anybody out of the water. Alabama, you know, didn't look great against South Florida anyway, but their defense is just kind of on another planet on that one.
You know, you get Milroe out of the pocket. I think it's going to be it's tough for any defense to really handle, and especially if Wisconsin can't score. It's going to be a tough one, but I tell you what, that's just 2 of the games out of the 6 we're going to mention. Number 24, Boston College just got ranked today, and Mizzou jumped up in the polls all the way to number 6. That's at 12:45. I think that's going to be a really fun game. This Boston College team under first-year head coach Bill O'Brien, it's going to be a lot of fun. Especially, you know, both Thomas Castellanos and Brady Cook, a couple of quarterbacks that can really do it with their legs and through the air. I think that one's going to be one of the more underrated matchups.
Yeah, and Boston College has 3 running backs with over 100 yards. And so it's a kind of a clash of philosophies. Like you mentioned, Bill O'Brien in his first year there, I really like that, what he's done so far in Chestnut Hill. And, you know, Mizzou, they're going to try and go through the air. Expect a lot of points in this one, I think. And then we'll move a little bit north from Columbia, Missouri, to West Lafayette, Indiana, where the Purdue Boilermakers are going to take on Notre Dame. You may be wondering how Notre Dame is number 18 after they beat Texas A&M. Well, the Irish fell victim to a copious amount of rat poison over, you know, coming off of the win against Texas A&M and fell flat on their face for perhaps the most disastrous loss in program history against Northern Illinois the other day. Riley Leonard looked horrific. The offense in general looked terrible. And after Jeremiah Love scored a long rushing touchdown in the third quarter, he didn't touch the ball the rest of the game. So it was just a bizarre game where Notre Dame looked woefully unprepared for a game against a MAC opponent right after they looked great against an SEC team on the road. So the Jekyll and Hyde effect of the Marcus Freeman era is still kind of there.
Purdue, you got to give a huge credit to Northern Illinois for showing up and really sticking it to Notre Dame. I mean, those guys fought hard. I mean, hey, you gotta prepare. Still, they went into South Bend, and I don't think anybody expected them to come out with the win, but you saw what it meant to their coach. He was in tears in the post-game interview. And
I think Riley Leonard knew what it took for Northern Illinois to win that game when he threw the worst pass ever when Notre Dame could have just ran the clock out and won. But anyway, Purdue, on the other hand, got a bye week in week 2, strangely enough, following a victory over Indiana State where Hudson Card broke the single-game passing completion record, which was kind of impressive there. So the Spoilermakers looking to upset the Irish in the renewal of this rivalry that hadn't been played since 2021, but this is just the second time in a decade. Now we move to the West Coast, to the graveyard of our once beloved Pac-12, where the 2 remnants, the Oregon State Beavers and the Washington State Cougars, are going to take on their old rivals in Oregon and UW.
It's the Civil War in the Apple Cup. I mean, in week 3, so it does feel like a bit of a rivalry week here, and I think that's super fun. That's one of, I think I can speak for both of us, probably some of our favorite weeks of the entire season are when, you know, it's just a hate fest on the football field. We get 2 examples of that, and then it's going to be a lot of fun, both at 3:30. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. You know, again, the lone soldiers left in the Pac-12 taking on Oregon and Washington, of course, who jumped to the Big Ten. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Pac-2 can get it done.
Absolutely, and you know, Oregon State lost everybody from a year ago after their head coach got hired by Michigan State. But they brought in a couple players. They have a running back tandem with both players over 200 yards, Jam Griffin and Anthony Hankerson. And then Oregon struggled in week 1 with the Idaho Vandals. Idaho's former quarterback of the last 3 years is now the quarterback for Oregon State, Giovanni McCoy. So that's a little bit of an interesting tagline to watch there. Oregon has struggled in Corvallis recently, and we'll see if they can kind of start getting it ramped up through the air. But now moving on to the Apple Cup, like you mentioned, both teams very different from a year ago, where Washington eked out the victory with a last-second field goal. Mississippi State transfer Will Rogers at quarterback for Washington has looked good, but they haven't really done anything too crazy. Washington State beat Texas Tech by 3 touchdowns last night. So I'm pretty interested in that one, both at 3:30. So we'll have to have the dual screen setup, I think.
We sure will. And, you know, this year for college football, you need a Peacock subscription. So be sure to, you know, fire that up, get that ready if you're interested in the Apple Cup. But we're going to take a little break from football and from the show. We've got the scoop on USC soccer and hockey when we get back. Gamecock men's soccer has also started off strong, shattering single-game attendance record for the program, as well as, you know, a little bit of a cheeky plug here, as SGTV has started doing radio-style broadcasts with yours truly, as well as some others, of the home game so far, and it's been a blast. It really has, and I think this team is surprising a lot of people. And us included, they haven't had a winning record in some time. They have 2 wins, no losses, and 2 draws to start the season. It's their best start since 2004, and the first time since 2004 that they've gotten at least a point in every game. So they haven't lost yet. Also, if you listen to our broadcast, you'd know, but they played a game at Jacksonville that got canceled due to rain, but they were up 3-0, so assuming they'll finish that game out, be their 3rd win on the season. They look really good. They drew Clemson 2-2, causing Clemson to drop out of that number 1 spot. And they're led by 2 guys, Ethan Ballack and Harrison Meyering up front. JP, tell us a little bit about them.
I mean, they've been outstanding. Ballack, of course, had a huge role in the 7-1 victory over Winthrop on opening night. And Meyering has been really kind of the steady presence, scoring some big-time goals in big-time moments for the Gamecocks. And their synergy has been really fun to watch, but the whole team has been great. The Gamecocks scored 20 goals all of last season, and they've already scored 13 through 4 games. And if, like you said, they've actually scored 16 with that unfinished game against Jacksonville. So, as non-conference play wraps up, they got a couple more games coming up against USC Upstate and East Tennessee State, which will be on SGTV. Make sure to keep in touch with those. And
our social media, of course, we'll be plugging when those live streams are and all that. But again, it's a really good time. It's a really fun team. It's a young team. And Coach Tony Annan looking to get his first winning season under his belt this year. JP, it looks promising.
Absolutely. And then they'll start conference play in the Sun Belt, in case you weren't aware that Gamecock men's soccer is in the Sun Belt. But it's not the Sun Belt you're thinking of. They will take on top 10 opponents like West Virginia and Marshall, as well as ranked teams like Central Florida, James Madison, and Kentucky. So, hey, it ain't your Fun Belt, Jacksonville State versus App State. Although how much I love college football Sun Belt, the Sun Belt men's soccer is a force to be reckoned with, on par with the ACC and the Big Ten. So it's been a lot of fun so far.
For sure. I mean, there was 5 ranked teams in the preseason poll from the Sun Belt. That's 1/5 of the entire country. So pretty impressive. But staying on the pitch, the women's soccer team recently fell out of the AP Top 25 due to 3 straight draws. But I wouldn't count that against them too much. They still look really good. They're 2-0-3 on the season, so 2 wins, no losses, 3 draws. They started out with 2 huge wins against Furman and, let me flip my sheet, College of Charleston. I knew it was an in-state opponent, but I wasn't going to mess it up. And then 3 straight ties against number 16 Ohio State, 1 against Miami of Ohio, and the most recent one against top 25 ranked Clemson. But this team, I mean, a lot of veteran presence on it. And, the title of our graphic is The Kat Berry Show, JP. We've been talking about her for years now, the dominant striker. And she leads the team in points, goals, and she's tied in assists. What does she mean to this team?
I mean, pretty much everything. I mean, she's really kind of the engine that gets the team going. And, when she's going, the other it shows, I think, in these games that they've drawn, of course, that she's been really kind of like the lone wanderer there a little bit, but, she's kept them afloat to the point where they haven't lost these games. And I think that's really important. Like you said, both soccer teams in Columbia haven't lost yet. And the game against Ohio State on the road against a tough ranked team and, an in-state rival in Clemson, and then the upcoming against Georgetown, another team from a high major conference. So this has been kind of a very tough non-conference for women's soccer. It's a very different schedule than the men's team.
Yeah, the men's have not played that many too difficult teams in the non-conference game so far, but one thing that is consistent among both teams is how they're able to pack out Stone Stadium.
That's true.
For the men's games, 6,600 people showed up to the first match of the semester in any sport against Winthrop, and that is number 1 in the nation. Then against the number 1 team, Clemson, 6,400 people showed out, and Gamecock men's soccer is looking to lead the entire nation in attendance for, is it the 3rd year in a row now? So, I mean, the fans sure do show up. I think it's so cool to see that because really, clearly, you don't see it many other places, but for both sports, each men's and the women's side have had over 6,000 people at one of their games this semester, at least one, and that's so cool to see.
Absolutely, and sticking with Gamecock athletics, although this one is on the club side, Cock Hockey is back and still crushing it as the boys began their season on the road with a sweep over the other Carolina school up in Chapel Hill.
That team to the north.
And they really kind of handled business. North Carolina took an early lead in that Friday night matchup, but the Gamecocks stormed back, and then a little bit of a barn burner on Saturday night.
And UNC tried to mount a late comeback, scored, I believe, 2 goals in the 3rd period, but hey, too little too late as Cock Hockey, man. I mean, you're seeing a picture of their title ring there.
I mean,
beautiful.
how sick is that, folks?
That is
but,
awesome.
you know, they have their first home game on this Friday with yours truly on the call, which should be a great time as always. You can catch that on our YouTube channel again this year. But it's a new look team as they lost captain Bobby DeCicco, Sean Reed, Jackson Toro, and Dylan Greeley as well, all key contributors a season ago. But guys like John Riggins, Carson Scove, and Marco Pineda all scored 2 goals this weekend against the Tar Heels. So the nucleus, as well as they had Tyler Tomoyan and net, who was great all the last season.
Especially in that postseason run. I mean,
Yeah.
they were great, and there's a lot of key guys. Really, you know, only losing 4 seniors is pretty good, especially for a team with. They have a lot of players. You know, hockey teams are pretty big. South Carolina's no different. They have a very deep bench, but a lot of those guys getting promoted to maybe a more prominent role in the team.
We saw Enzo Finelli take over that left wing role on the first line for Carolina, as well as that Ben Riccitelli, Ronan Mulcairn blue line was so key for them. Ben Riccitelli, kind of the unsung hero, I think. And so we'll get to see that. We'll bring you a lot about that team, of course, as the year goes on, I think.
And you know how we like to end our Ball Don't Lie episodes. We'll be right back after one more break to wrap up this week's episode with BDL Pick'ems.
Welcome to BDL Pick'ems. We're each starting the season with a clean slate, so let's get it started with some upcoming NFL games tonight and tomorrow as we begin the primetime NFL slate with Sunday Night Football between the Detroit Lions and the LA Rams. Spencer, who do you got?
Man, I'm going with the Lions. This is one of the most fun teams, I think, in football. And especially watching the Panthers game earlier, I'd like to see more than 10 points scored. I think the Lions will do just that. And I like Dan Campbell, man. I think it's going to be a fun game. Who you got in that one, JP?
I love Dan Campbell, too. I think Jared Goff gets his revenge against his former team. I think it'll be a fun game. Matthew Stafford, one of the best quarterbacks still in the NFL, because quarterbacks now kind of suck. It's something we started to learn that we lived through the golden age of the depth of QB play. Remember, people used to be like, "Oh, Matthew Stafford, he's not even that good. He's like the 14th best quarterback." Now he's 36 years old and he's like the third best.
Top 10, top 5.
It's insane. But Jared Goff rocks. The Lions, Dan Campbell, the Applebee's commercial was awesome. They're a fun team. They're going to chew some kneecaps, I think, here.
Let's do it.
And I'll pick the Lions. And then tomorrow night, we get Aaron Rodgers going on the road to Levi Stadium to take on the San Francisco 49ers. Jets 49ers, Spencer, who do you got?
You know, if Rodgers makes it past the first drive this time, I'm taking the Jets. I think they're going to be a good team. They acquired a lot in free agency, but I do think it kind of entirely depends on him. You know, like if he goes out.
Also, if Hassan Reddick plays.
We'll see. It's looking like he's not. I would assume he's not. And, you know, that entire situation is pretty fun to look at from an outside perspective. But again, I think these are 2 really, really good teams. I think it's going to be fun. I just went with the Jets maybe for like James Gandolfini, just showing my support.
Yeah.
But also just it'll be fun.
It will be. I think so.
I'm looking for like a nice Rodgers to Garrett Wilson connection. I think they'll be firing on all cylinders.
There we go.
Well, I short-circuited there for a second. JP, who do you have in the Monday night game?
I'm taking the 49ers. I mean, they got Trent Richardson figured. Not Trent Richardson.
Well, they did extend Trent Williams.
Sorry, they got Trent Williams figured out.
And
they
Ayuk.
held on to Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel back in the fold as well. They'll be without first-round pick Ricky Pearsall after he got shot, but he's okay, which is good. But the 49ers are still the 49ers, and I can't. Their substance and the Jets right now are all flash and hype, and I can't take that right now. As we move on to college football, which is we covered a lot of that slate as we throw it to that Friday night game.
Sure will. Starting it off, it's Kansas State versus Arizona. JP, who you got in that one?
I'm going to take the Wildcats of Kansas State. It's a home game. Avery Johnson's only getting better, one of the more talented quarterbacks. And I just think their run game is too much. Arizona hasn't really – they looked really good on offense in their first game, but bad on defense. And they looked good on defense and bad on offense against Northern Arizona last night. So I'm taking Kansas State, who went on the road and beat a pretty decent Tulane squad, and I think the running game is just too much.
Couldn't agree more. Again, I think DJ Giddens is going to be the key to that game, as Avery Johnson and Noah Fafita, I think, are both expected to have good games, and I think they will, but the running attack of the Wildcats, I think, will be too much. Staying right here in Columbia, South Carolina versus LSU. home of the game day, college game day for the first time in a decade, which feels weird. 2024, 2014 felt like a couple sleeps ago, but, here we are now. JP, I'm taking the Gamecocks. Who are you taking?
I'm also taking the Gamecocks, ladies and gentlemen.
Man.
I picked them to beat Kentucky, so how can I pick them to lose to LSU?
I forgot to mention it. I also picked. We've talked about it all week. How the Cast the Ball don't lie. That first off, we wouldn't lie to you. All right, it's our namesake. South Carolina. We picked them last week. Let's ride again.
I think they get some explosives through the air, and Grant Nussmeier kind of struggles under the heat and the intense atmosphere and the pressure by Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart. I think there's a timely interception by Debo Williams as well thrown in there. And I think the Gamecocks roll.
How about it, Debo?
I think the Gamecocks notch a huge victory. But then, more SEC action.
Sure is. It's the big noon kickoff, which is weird because it's not two Big Ten teams. It's Wisconsin versus number 4 Alabama. Going on the road, does Alabama. How do you think they fare?
I think they might struggle a little bit. Wisconsin does have a good defense. They have good running backs, and they didn't look great against South Florida. It's the first road game under Kalen DeBoer, the new head coach for Alabama after Nick Saban retired. So I think there will be a little bit of a lulling period. It might be like 17-6, 17-10, or something like that at halftime. But I think they comfortably – Tyler Van Dyke will make a horrific mistake somewhere, as he's prone to do. One of the leaders in turnovers over the last few seasons of college football. And I just don't think Wisconsin has enough in the gas to really kind of keep up with them. So I'll take Alabama.
I'm also going to take Alabama. I don't know that it'll be particularly close. It might be for a little bit. I think Bama's too much. Again, staying with one SEC team, we've got Mizzou versus Boston College. It's in the other Columbia out in Como. Who you got in that one?
Yeah, Mizzou, kind of a friend of the program. They've appeared here a lot. They've appeared on Pick'ems a lot, and I've picked them a lot, and I'm picking them again. I think Brady Cook, Luther Van Burden connect through the air. Nate Noel, the transfer back from App State, gets it going. Although I think Thomas Castellanos at Boston College are on the rise, and it's going to be a high-scoring shootout, I'll take Mizzou to hang on for the win.
I tell you what, I think the Eagles escaped the zoo. Give me Boston College, man. Those guys look like they're having fun. Bill O'Brien is cooking up. I think he's cooked up a really great offensive game plan, and I think they're going to take down Mizzou on the road. And this Boston College team, I don't know if you're a fan out there, take a look at their schedule. They look to have it pretty easy. Could see them in an ACC title game here later on in the season. Moving on, Purdue, Notre Dame. Who you got in that one?
Well, after the horror show of yesterday, I really don't even want to think about this too much, but I will because it's my job. But also because Marcus Freeman teams have always responded shockingly well to self-inflicted adversity. When they lost to Marshall 2 years ago, when they lost to Louisville last year, they've always bounced back with winning streaks when they beat up on teams on the road and beat ranked squads. And the defense travels well. We saw it in College Station. I think they're going to go to a very run-heavy game plan. They might even make a change at quarterback. But I think Freeman can get them refocused. And really, it's the season on the line already here in Week 3 because you forced yourself into this hole. I think Notre Dame wins. It's probably not pretty, but I think their defense gets to Hudson Card enough, and they'll squeak out a victory.
I think you're right. I think they should hand the ball off about 35 times. But I think the Irish get it done. We'll move out to formerly a Pac-12 game. Oregon State, Oregon. It's the Civil War, JP. Who you got taking it home?
Oregon has flirted with disaster through 2 games, and now they go on the road to Corvallis, a land of beavers, logs, and chainsaws, baby. And I think the Beavers are going to rev it on up against Oregon, and I'm picking them to win. I think they're going to get off with a huge victory and stick it to those traitors.
I think Oregon escaped with a win last night. I think they'll take care of business against Oregon State. I don't think Oregon State could run the ball right down the Ducks' throat all game long. That's what Boise State did. Oregon handled it. I think they're going to end up being a college football playoff team. Even though they haven't looked super special, Evan Stewart and Dylan Gabriel, I think they're going to be too much. I don't think Oregon State can handle it. And we'll move on to our another Pac-2 matchup. It's Wazoo versus Washington in the Apple Cup. Who do you have in this one?
Man, I've already picked one of the lone guard of the Pac-12, and Washington it's a lot easier to pick against them than it is Oregon. And I think Wazoo, they're just more proven. I like them at home. They're on the road in Seattle for the 2nd straight year, which is weird. But I like them to go into there, and I like them to get the win. They looked good against Texas Tech. Their defense was flying around. They've got Mateer, the backup quarterback, who has really kind of come on. I think they get the nice win against Will Rogers in Washington.
And I promise you, I'm a Pac-12 believer. I mean, I visit the gravestone every once in a while, but it's not me picking against them. I'll never, ever stop holding up the W. Go Washington. The Huskies bring it home. They did let me down in the national championship game, but I'll dance past that as the Michigan team was just a little too unfair. But I think the Huskies get it done at home. I think Jed Fish is probably going to build a pretty good program up there in Seattle. And, maybe he'll leave for an SEC job in a couple of years too. But Will Rogers really slings the ball. It's going to be fun to watch. And our last one of the day, just kind of a random one. We just, threw a dart at the map and landed in Oklahoma. They play Tulane. Who do you think wins this weird but fun matchup?
It's a battle of the newest SEC team versus one of the oldest, as Tulane, the Green Wave, used to be in the SEC. Tulane lost a heartbreaker versus Kansas State. Oklahoma escaped a disgusting 16-12 game against Houston, who lost a UNLV bad in their opener, so I don't know what was going on there. But it's going to be a close game, I think. I like Tulane, but I think Oklahoma gets it done at home. Just a little bit too much talent defensively to falter in this one.
Yep, roll wave. Tulane gets it done. Oklahoma looked atrocious yesterday.
They looked stupid. They even looked like physical. Like their uniforms sucked. What were they wearing?
Their helmets were just like, were they sparkly? Like there was no logo on them. It was just like silver and a white stripe. That's who would know?
1912
that's
throwbacks.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Tulane gets it done. We watched the last 10 minutes of that Oklahoma game. They couldn't put away a Houston team that was atrocious. They had to get a safety to get the ball punted back to them to close it out because they couldn't score on Houston's defense. I think that says it. That does the talking for me. Go Tulane. But again, we're going to finally stop talking. That's going to do it for this episode, the first one of Season 4 of Ball Don't Lie. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and TikTok at SGTV at USC.
To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at sgtv@usc.com. For SGTV, I'm JP Barry.
And I'm Spencer Ball. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great night, Carolina.
Forever to thee.